Hey, my friends, welcome back to Body Led by Design. Before we get into today's episode, I want to make sure that you know about the upcoming Midsummer reset. Everything I've been talking about in the past couple of episodes, as well as today, talking about inflammation, healing your gut, supporting your hormones. This is everything that the Midsummer reset is built around. It's going to be a 4-week whole food anti-inflammatory protocol starting on July 13th. It's only $99. So make sure to head to the show notes to sign up and save your spot, or head to Instagram and DM me the word reset, and I will send you all of the sign up information and we'll get you rolling and set up inside of the reset as soon as you click. Okay, my friends, today we're going into episode 3 around weight loss resistance. We're going to one of my favorite topics that I love to geek out on, and that is your labs. If you've been following along in this series so far, 2 episodes, we talked about who the typical person is that would be experiencing weight loss resistance. Last week, we talked about the reasons for weight loss resistance. And then today, we're talking all about the data. How do we actually find out what's going on inside of your body so we stop guessing and we start doing the right things for your specific situation? And I want to get into something before we get too deep into labs, because this really matters a lot. I'm always somebody who wants to look at the nuances. I don't go all the way black. I don't go all the way white. Is that most of you have already had labs done. You probably went to your doctor, you asked for help, you got your blood work, and you were probably told that everything is normal. There's nothing that's keeping you from losing weight. So you walk out of the office feeling confused and dismissed and like, well, there's apparently nothing wrong with me, but I still feel terrible. So actually, this feels even worse than when I didn't know if something was or wasn't wrong with me. What do I actually do? That experience is incredibly common. And it's not because your doctor did anything wrong. It's because your doctor and I are looking for completely different things. And because your doctor is trained to diagnose and to treat. That's what they are trained to do when they go to school. So they're looking at your labs, looking for something that rises to the level of diagnosis, something that warrants pharmaceutical intervention, a referral, or a specific treatment. That's a very important job. We are not dismissing the job of your doctor. But here is one thing, is that by the time you get to that point that something shows up as being diagnosable on a blood draw, you've usually been in a suboptimal pattern for a really long time, usually years. And your body's been quietly compensating on the back end and holding on to body fat in your low energy state. It doesn't show up as an abnormal lab on your standard lab draw until it's gotten pretty far down the road. Me, on the other hand, I'm not looking for a diagnosis. I'm looking for suboptimal patterns that are running in the background of your body. The things that are not blaringly loud enough to trigger a diagnosis, but are absolutely loud enough to keeping your body running in a low energy state and making fat loss be impossible. So your doctor can actually run every single lab that I'm going to talk about today and look at the same exact numbers and come to a different conclusion than I would, because we are looking for different things. They are looking for a threshold that requires treatment. I'm looking for optimal. And those two things are very different. Your doctor is also not trained in weight loss resistance. They are not here looking through labs through that lens. They don't have really the capacity in their day-to-day to be able to sit down with that whole full picture and with you in person to say what's keeping your body in this low energy state. However, I do. That's why there's nuances and there's coaches and people who go into this field to be able to help you with those things in between the picture. So I run labs because at a certain point, it becomes very clear that your body is not responding in the way that it should be. You could be eating in what would be or could be or should be a calorie deficit for somebody at your height, your weight, your age, and your activity level, and nothing is moving. We've all done that before. We've put our height and our weight and our activity level in MyFitnessPal, and it spews out a number and we're like, okay, I'll do this. And then we log our food. And then the stupid thing like spits out, you will weigh blah, 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 blah in 16 weeks if you just stay consistent. And that is baloney. That is a bullshit answer. Stop completing your entry to look at that stupid number it tells you. It is arbitrary. And it also will make you feel incredibly frustrated and probably a little crazy. So I'm not necessarily talking about a big calorie deficit here, but let's say you're eating what should be a calorie deficit. So like sub 1,500 calories. I'm going to say about this range because most women are within about, 4 inches of each other and around the same activity level. So we're just assuming this here. Definitely not just for you, right? But then not seeing anything at like a sub 1,500 calorie intake. Or worse, you could even be gaining at this intake. What we have here is a problem that goes beyond food and exercise. And the other part too is like if you're eating 1,500 calories or less and you're gaining weight or you're not, or you're not losing weight, and then you try to keep cutting calories to try to force your body to respond, you're actually creating harm on your body. Because you're losing micronutrients, you're losing minerals, you're losing macronutrients. These are the very things that your body needs to function well. You're putting yourself into a position of damaging your body in order to lose weight. That's not a solution. That's creating a new and different problem. Let me say that again. Continuing to cut your calories when you're perpetuating a already weight loss resistance picture and you're eating around 1,500 calories, 1,400 calories, 1,300, 1,200, even less than that, I see, you are causing harm to your body by cutting out the things that it needs to survive. You're not creating a solution. You're creating a different problem than weight loss at this point. So labs give us a way out of this cycle. They give us something to work on that is not guesswork. They stop the spiral of I've tried everything and nothing works, and let us actually look at why. And when you can see the why, when we have the data, when we build a protocol around what your body actually needs instead of some generic plan saying, oh, this is what should work based on math. And what I will tell you is that what I see every time I do labs for somebody and I go over your results, you have this sense of relief because for the first time in years, you can see that there's an actual reason going on here. You're not crazy. You're not lazy. You didn't make this up. You haven't lost your grit. Your body has been dealing with something underneath the hood. And that feels very validating. And it's a moment of being like, oh, I'm not necessarily the perpetuating problem here. And this is actually the physiology of my body. And it changes everything about how you move forward. It also gives you something to believe in. And when we believe, we all of a sudden start doing things differently. And when we can shift our mindset into believing, because when our emotions are running really high around weight loss resistance, so thinking, I can't lose weight, this is impossible for me, nothing ever works, this is an incredibly personal and frustrating situation. And your ability to make clear, aligned decisions starts to go way down when your emotions are really high. You're not thinking rationally. You're thinking from a place of shame and confusion and exhaustion. But when you can put data in front of you and say, look, this is what's actually happening and here's why, and here's a really clear path forward, it gives you something to believe in that a different result is possible. And when women believe, women can shift a lot of shit really fast in a positive way. Not because we're positive thinking, but because now we have data and belief on our side. So let's go into the actual labs that I use. I'm going to walk you through each one, what I'm looking for, why it matters for weight loss resistance specifically. Also know if this type of information is overwhelming for you, just know you don't have to know any of this. Hiring somebody like me alleviates that off of your workload, off of your shoulders. You don't have to know any of this, but I also know that there's a large segment of people that when they understand the why, they can make sense of things and they can see why it would be beneficial to find a different solution for you. So my first is going to be the Dutch test. That's one of my favorite. A Dutch test stands for the dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. It really gives us a picture of what a standard blood draw can simply not give us. Because when your doctor checks your hormones on a serum lab draw, so that just means when I say serum, it means blood, they're getting a snapshot, one moment in time, one number. And from that number, they're going to determine whether you need a hormonal HRT or a medication or not. That's not what I need to know. What I need to know is what hormones are you actually producing? How is your body using them? And how is your body detoxing them? Because those are the drivers of weight loss resistance. Because you can have really low estrogen on a blood draw or actually completely normal estrogen on a blood draw and still have estrogen dominant symptoms. And a test like the Dutch test shows us that. I also told you about that a couple episodes ago. I think I did a series of 3 on the Dutch test and what I look for on the Dutch test, different conditions that the Dutch test can help you with. If you just scroll back in the feed, I mean, that was probably like 5 episodes ago, somewhere in there, you'll see a whole like 3 episodes all about the Dutch test if you want to go a little bit more into detail on it. But the Dutch test is also collected over 24 hours, which gives us a complete picture. I can see your cortisol rhythm throughout the day, not just one cortisol number, but also how it moves from morning to night. I can see the different types of estrogens you're making, whether your body's clearing them properly. I can see your progesterone, your DHEA, your melatonin. I can also see nutritional organic acids. And those are things that tell me more information about your B vitamin status, your oxidative stress in your body, your neurotransmitter metabolism. It tells a really good complete story and allows me to read your entire body like a story from the beginning to the end versus just one quick little shot of information. And your doctor likely doesn't run this test unless you go to a functional health provider, not because it's not valuable, it absolutely is, but really they can't diagnose or treat you with HRT off of a urine test. HRT needs to be dosed off of a blood draw. So they're just simply not going to do a urine test because that is not how they're going to use that information for you and through the lens that they're working through. But I'm not dosing your medication. I'm not giving you HRT. I'm building a protocol to help your body heal. So if you need HRT in the future, that HRT is going to work really well. But dosing for HRT does not happen off of a Dutch test. Okay, the next test that I love, honestly, this is my favorite test ever, is the GI map test. The GI map test is a stool test that looks at your entire gut microbiome picture. And something about this that is so important is most people want to jump straight into balancing their hormones when they have weight loss resistance. It's so easy, especially with the information that we're fed on Instagram and social media, that our hormones are always the problem. Our hormones are just responders to the internal environment. Your gut is oftentimes the internal environment that your hormones are responding to. What I'm looking for on a GI map test is the balance of your gut bacteria, the good stuff, the overgrown stuff that's not so good. I'm looking at pathogens, but honestly, pathogens are usually the least interesting thing on this test together. What I'm really looking at is the health of your gut lining. How well is your gut lining holding everything together? Because if you have what is commonly known as leaky gut, where your gut lining is permeable and food particles are getting through into your bloodstream where they do not belong, we really can't heal weight loss resistance. We can do all the right things with food and hormones, but it won't matter if your gut is leaky. Your body is going to stay really inflamed when this happens, and it stays in a stress state. And it's going to keep holding on to body fat. Because remember, back to last week and the week before, we talked really heavily on weight loss resistance is always the body not feeling safe. So if the body is inflamed from food particles going into the bloodstream where they should not be, that is creating a stress state, and stress equals to the body. I don't feel safe here. And then I'm also looking at your digestive capacity, how well your body's actually breaking down and absorbing what you eat, because you can be eating the best diet in the world, the most nutrient dense food in the world. And if your gut's not absorbing it, it's not getting it. It's just going straight to the toilet. And the other thing about pathogens is when you heal the gut environment, when the good bacteria are thriving, the gut lining is healthy, and the immune system inside the gut is functioning the way it should, most of the time the pathogens work their way out on their own. I do usually add in some antimicrobials to speed that process up, but the goal isn't necessarily to go heavy-handed after pathogens and overgrowth. The goal is to really create an environment inside of the gut where the pathogens just simply don't survive. And many times, if you ask your doctor, if you're having digestive issues, for a stool test to look for the issues of your gut, they're going to look strictly for pathogens. And many times we're missing the marker on seeing, well, where are the suboptimal things that we need to look at, which is the good bacteria inside of your gut. And then also, how good is your digestive capacity? Many times those are going to be looked over when we're just looking at pathogens. And then also what you'll be handed is an antibiotic. And an antibiotic is also going to create conditions that will exacerbate other poor conditions inside of the microbiome. So remember, like if you're like, I'll just ask my doctor for a stool test, that is not the same as a GI map test. Okay, the next lab that I also think is always a good one to just double check is your vitamin D. Vitamin D is not actually a vitamin. It's super tricky. It's actually a hormone. And it plays a role in your immune function, in your mood, in your sleep, in your inflammation levels, and your metabolic health. It's one of the markers on how your body actually creates energy. A lot of times we're low, especially when we live, if you live in the Midwest with me and we have like 6 months of cloudiness and it's cold and we're inside, we don't get that sunshine exposure, which is how the body really converts vitamin D. So many times we can be low. However, I always encourage you not to just guess on vitamin D and start taking a vitamin D supplement because we live in the Midwest. Vitamin D is not water soluble. That simply means that your body doesn't get rid of excess vitamin D. So if you have normal vitamin D levels and then you start supplementing vitamin D, your body can become overloaded and it can't get rid of excess vitamin D by itself. And there is such thing as vitamin D toxicity. There just really is no point on trying to add in vitamin D without actually checking your levels. There are many labs you can just walk into and ask for a vitamin D level. If you go to your yearly doctor appointment, just make sure that they run that at all times. And then that just makes sure that if you're supplementing for the right reason and you know that your body actually needs this hormone. The next one I like to run is an iron panel. I'm not just talking about one iron level. I want to see a full iron panel, not just your hemoglobin, not just your iron, your ferritin, your serum iron, your iron saturation. Because iron is an energy marker. If you've ever had low iron, you know that you feel gosh darn tired and you feel like garbage. When iron is low, your body has a really hard time converting food into usable energy. So that energy conversion is very sluggish and very slow and very hard to do when we don't have that iron available to be able to move food into energy. This is often running low because of poor nutrient intake. It can also run low because of chronic stress. But one of the most common reasons that I see that it is low is because your gut is unhealthy. Your gut is not actually absorbing the iron that you're consuming. And so we can keep taking iron. We can even take iron supplements, and yet our iron never changes substantially because our gut's not actually absorbing it, breaking it down, and making it usable. So again, that's why I go almost always to that GI map test if we have any digestive issues, because that GI map test is going to tell us, oh, her digestive function is really low. Let's fix that. And then boom, you start absorbing iron. You don't have to take an iron supplement, which honestly kind of sucks to take, and you start absorbing iron naturally through your food intake. The next one is vitamin B12. This is the same idea as iron. This is an energy conversion marker. So when B12 is low, your body cannot produce energy efficiently. It also plays a role in your nerve function, your mood, your cognitive clarity, and it is commonly low in women who are under chronic stress, not eating enough, but again, having gut absorption issues, which again, this is the exact population of the people I'm working with is that gut absorption issue. We talked last week about the root causes of weight loss resistance. And one of the most common ones that I talked about was that your body's not breaking down the food because of the poor gut lining because of chronic stress, right? Chronic stress leads to inflammation, leads to breaking down the gut lining, and then inflammation equals stress. And so it's this perpetuating cycle that we just keep breaking down things inside of our body because of the body doesn't feel safe, right? So it's our job to make sure that the body feels safe, to heal from the inside. And then once that begins to happen, we set up the foundation and the ability to be able to move forward with a safe body to be able to burn body fat for fuel. Okay, next would be a thyroid panel. But this one, I want to be very clear that this is far beyond just the normal TSH that is commonly drawn at a doctor's office. I feel very strongly about a full thyroid panel. Many times when you ask for your thyroid to be checked, they'll just check a TSH. But a TSH just tells us how hard your thyroid is working, specifically how hard your brain is pushing your thyroid to produce hormones. It doesn't tell us whether your body's actually using these hormones. So I want to see a TSH, a free T4, a free T3, a reverse T3, and thyroid antibodies. The reason I want the T4 and the T3 is because the conversion between those two is so much of where the thyroid picture actually lives. Your thyroid produces T4, but T4 has to be converted into T3 to actually be used by your cells. And that conversion process gets really sluggish when you're under chronic stress, when your nutrition is poor, when your sleep is off, when you have toxin exposure. So you can have a perfectly normal TSH. Your brain is pushing your thyroid just fine, but your body's not actually making the conversion happening so that you have a usable form of thyroid hormone. And then you get every symptom of a sluggish thyroid: fatigue, weight gain, brain fog, feeling cold all the time, your hair is thinning, and your labs can come back as normal. And a reverse T3, this one is the hardest to get, to be honest. Nobody wants to order a reverse T3. But this tells us if your body's actively blocking that conversion. And then thyroid antibodies, specifically TPO antibodies, will tell us if there's an autoimmune process happening. Because if we have Hashimoto's or if antibodies are elevated and we don't know about it, we really need to build a protocol that allows your immune system to calm down. So once you have that thyroid diagnosis, I still encourage you. So let's say you were diagnosed already with hypothyroidism and you know you have Hashimoto's, but you never get your antibodies rechecked after that point because you're on Synthroid or levothyroxine and you just keep assuming it's working. I really encourage you to advocate for yourself and get those antibodies drawn at least yearly, because your goal is to make sure that those antibodies come down. Otherwise, those antibodies continue to attack your thyroid, even being on Synthroid, even being on levothyroxine. And we want to make sure that those antibodies come down, because if they don't come down, what ends up happening, like I just said, your thyroid continues to get attacked, but also you lay the foundation for another autoimmune condition to come in. Once you have one and those antibodies stay elevated, you are so much more likely to create another autoimmune condition. Nobody wants that. So working on getting those antibodies down, which is everything that I do in my coaching, your nutrition, your stress, your sleep, your movement, all of those things, the lifestyle factors are what really bring those antibodies down. Okay, the next set that I like to see is a fasting insulin, a fasting glucose, and a hemoglobin A1C. I want all of these three things together because each one tells me just a little bit different thing. Fasting glucose is just a number. Honestly, it's not super useful on its own because there's so many things that can influence it on any given morning. How long ago did you eat the night before? What was your sleep like? Your stress? What did you eat last night? All of it is just one data point. It could vary vastly from day to day. Hemoglobin A1C gives me a 3-month average. Sounds more useful, and it is, except that if your blood sugar has been going really high and then really low over and over again, which very commonly is the type of client that I'm working with, where you're under eating and your blood sugar goes low and then it spikes up, either because you're eating or because your cortisol has come into the picture now to raise your blood sugar. Those extremes over time actually average to a number that looks really normal. So the average normal is hiding a picture of significant blood sugar instability. We want to avoid the highs and lows just as much as we want to avoid the chronic highs. That's why fasting insulin is actually my favorite of the three. Insulin is the hormone that responds to your blood sugar. And if your blood sugar has been going high and low and high and low, even if the average looks okay of your hemoglobin A1C, your insulin is going to tell me that. High fasting insulin tells me that your body has been working really hard to manage blood sugar instability. It's working really hard to manage the highs and the lows, not just the highs. And here's why that matters for weight loss resistance, is because insulin is the hormone that moves energy into your cells to be used for fuel. And when insulin is chronically elevated, that process breaks down. Energy is not getting into the cells, it's sitting outside of them. And then your body stores that as body fat instead of burning it as fuel. So you can be eating in a calorie deficit, but if your insulin is too high, your body's not using food for energy. It's storing it. And that's a very specific, also very fixable problem, but you can't fix it if you don't know it's there. And if you think that your blood sugar is normal because you did a fasting glucose and you don't ever know that you actually have an insulin problem. Not necessarily in this day and time a glucose problem. Okay, next one is your lipid panel. I like to look at your lipid panel because it tells me long-term picture of what's been going on metabolically, because I also know that there's a lot of confusion around your lipid panel, which is your cholesterol. When a woman in midlife comes back with an abnormal lipid panel, the first thing she's told is to do a calorie deficit and or watch her red meat consumption, her eggs, or like her fat consumption. 9 times out of 10, that is not the problem. For a woman in perimenopause and midlife, abnormal cholesterol is almost always driven by prolonged blood sugar instability and poor muscle mass, not dietary fat. When your blood sugar is chronically high and low, and when your muscle mass is not there to soak up the blood sugar and use it for energy, your body has to do something with all that excess sugar. It stores it as body fat, and then that shows up in your lipid panel. So when I see an abnormal lipid panel in someone in midlife, a woman in midlife, I'm not thinking eat less fat. I'm thinking blood sugar, muscle, and this has been going on for a while. Okay, next, CBC and CMP. These are often done yearly by your doctor, they're very standard draws. This just tells us the overall roundabout picture of your health. Electrolyte balance, your liver and kidney function. It tells me whether your body has the internal resources it needs to actually begin to heal. It's like if your foundational nutrient status is off, we really need to address that first. And then the CBC gives us a look at your red blood cells, white blood cells, your platelets, just to look for things like anemia, obvious energy drains, and making sure your immune system is functioning as it should. Just making sure we're not missing over something that would be a big red flag that would tell us on your CBC and your CMP. And then lastly, your CRP. So your CRP is a marker of inflammation. And I do think it's a good one to look at. However, I'm going to be completely honest with you, how much weight I put on it. A CRP can come back very normal for a woman like us, and you can absolutely be inflamed. And I can usually tell from your symptoms alone, bloating, water retention, brain fog, blood sugar instability, fatigue, that inflammation is present. 10 out of 10 times my clients are inflamed, even with a CRP that's fairly normal, because that CRP is really measuring for very intense inflammation, looking for a diagnosis, right? We're not looking for a diagnosis with your CRP. We're looking for general low-grade inflammation, which is something that we heal with nutrition, with movement, with nervous system regulation, and allowing that body to feel safe. So it's great. It's a nice little marker to look at, but I don't give it all the weight of being like, oh, you're not inflamed just because your CRP isn't elevated. Again, that CRP is looking for really high inflammation. So this is where that summer reset really comes in, because the protocol that I'm going to give you during the 2 weeks of the Midsummer reset is designed specifically to reduce that low-grade inflammation that keeps you feeling blah and yucky. It's also going to be great for your gut to start any healing that needs to happen internally, and really gives us that clean reset that our body is craving for, even in July. So make sure to head to the show notes to sign up for the Midsummer Reset. We start on Monday. And even if you're listening to this a little later, just click it and see if enrollment is still open. You might surprise yourself. You can also go to Instagram and DM me the word reset, and I will send you the link to sign up. So before we close in on this episode, I want to touch on one more thing. When a client sits down with me and we go over your lab results for the first time, there's always this moment where you just finally feel seen and you feel validated and you feel understood in a way that you probably haven't before. Because I know you've been blaming yourself for quite some time. I know you've made this very personal that you can't lose weight. And you've told yourself that you just can't get it together. You need to try harder. And there's something you're missing, right? And maybe you feel like you're lacking the discipline that somebody else has and you just don't have that. But then when you see the data and the information, you get to take all of that emotion out of it. And you get to just realize, oh, it's not inherently me and who I am. It's what's going on with my physical body. And this is actually very solvable. And yes, 20 years ago, you could have cleaned up your diet. You could have gone for a run. You could have dropped 5 pounds in 2 weeks. But this is not your picture anymore. Your body has changed. Your life has changed. And your approach has to change with it. Weight loss resistance is also not a life sentence. This is just data. And data means that there's answers. And data means that there are solutions. Remember, it's not about living in a smaller body. It's not about chasing a number on the scale. It's about being the version of you that you really like best, the version of you that has energy, that thinks clearly, that shows up fully and feels like herself in her body. And adjusting your body composition, getting your hormones working, healing your gut, building the muscle, stabilizing your blood sugar, that can be the momentum that really gets you there. Not because diet culture said you should weigh a certain amount, but because you deserve to feel good in the body you are living in. So next week, we're going to go into a mental and emotional weight loss component piece, because this is a part that we cannot skip over. The truth is, weight loss resistance today was very data, very sciencey, but you are a multi-spectrum human. It isn't always just data. There are other things running in the background that will perpetuate weight loss resistance. And those are the emotional, mental components that happen with it. Because if we're going to heal weight loss resistance on a physical level, we're also going to heal it on a mental and emotional level as well. So stay tuned for next week, and I will see you soon.